Hi everyone, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here. Today we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to take a look at a series of positions that'll give you, I hope, some very good tactics practice. So we'll have 9 positions in all, and get your tactics thinking cap on, because you're going to get a workout. Now, this first position is from a game that I kind of hoped originally, before it happened, that I hoped would be maybe by itself the subject of today's show. Last week, you may recall, I took a look at the game Caruana against Viktor Korchnoi, which was won by Korchnoi, and it was an amazing game on a variety of levels. I mean, one point was just that it was a very good game. A second point was just that it was extremely exciting that this almost 80-year-old man would be able to give a whooping to one of the best players in the world, and someone who was 61 years younger than him as well. So Korchnoi had gone through Gibraltar up to today undefeated, doing fantastically well, and this round, or the last round, he was paired with Francisco Vallejo Pons, who was a 2700 player, lower than Caruana, but still 2700, and he had white. And if he had won this, my goodness, I mean, it would have been better than a 2700 performance rating for the tournament. He would have, I think, tied for 5th. He would have gone undefeated. Just fantastic, incredible performance. But he was getting outplayed in the opening, and really Vallejo was just winning the game. But Vallejo always seems to get into time trouble, and it was a very complicated game. And by the time we reached this position, Vallejo had made 3 mistakes in a row. And it's Korchnoi with white to move in this position. What should he do? So throughout this video, I would say, pause whenever I present a problem to you. Pause the recording until you think you've found a solution. Of course, you finding the solution and not your engine. And then when you're ready, we'll proceed. Okay, well, the D file is covered. E6 is covered by the black rook on B6. But Korchnoi had a very good idea, which was to use the A file. Unfortunately, he found the wrong way to use it. He played rook d to a1, and after king f8, black was safe. So rook a7 has been neutralized, and the game ended pretty quickly. Korchnoi just really couldn't scrape up any serious attack from this point. So it went like this: bishop d5, e2, queen f2, bishop to d4, queen takes e2, knight takes d5. Now Korchnoi down 2 pieces, and of course, okay, black doesn't allow queen to f8 mate, and at this point, white has no attack. Black is going to have just an immediate win, pretty much a forced mate if white doesn't swap queens, and of course, if white does swap queens, it's pointless as well. So Korchnoi resigned here, but he missed an outright win. And as I said, he had a good idea. He had the right idea, which was to use the A file. What he got wrong was thinking he needed to double rooks. Rook to a7 is simply winning. And the point is that after queen takes a7, queen takes e5 check, white just breaks through. So white's down a full rook here, but it doesn't matter. Black's best in the maybe in scare quote sense is just to give the rook away, but after bishop takes e6 or queen takes e6 check, white is just crushing black. But unfortunately for black, the natural king to f8 is even worse. It gets mated by force and all with checks. Rook to d8, rook to g8, taking advantage of the pinned knight, queen f4, bishop to e2, and now the fastest is to take with the pawn, and then play g5 mate. So a real pity for Korchnoi there. I mean, he should have lost the game originally, but he had this chance, and it was a great chance, one that he should have seen. Especially since I think he actually had a fair amount of time on the clock, too. Now, I would say that despite his great successes against Mikhail Tal in their career, Tal would have found rook to a7 in a millisecond, I'm convinced. Oh well. Still a great performance by Korchnoi, and one that gives his fans hope that he can... all right, he won't get to number 2 in the world again, but I'm sure that he'll still have good chances to make it back to a 2600 level. Okay, next puzzle. Now this is an oldie but goodie, and I'll give you this one as kind of an extra credit. So the first, well, okay, the task is for white to move and win. All right. So look at it from that standpoint first. Okay, and then when you come back from trying to solve it, I'll say something more about this. Okay, well, now we can fine-grain this in a couple of ways. So first of all, if you didn't find it, you can revise the puzzle as white to move and mate in 2. Secondly, look for alternative ways to win. So some of you already know this, or you found the mate in 2, but there's actually another mechanism by which white can win this position. So see if you can find that as well. Okay, so this is a composition attributed to Paul Morphy. I haven't seen a date for this, but here's the mate in 2. So the mate in 2 is rook h6. Otherwise, black plays h6. So here, if the bishop moves, it's rook takes h7 mate, and if pawn takes, then g7 mate. So it's a simple one, just a little warm-up here, exercise for you here. But here's the fun thing: there's a second way to win, and this is a little bit more complicated. And there are a number of ways that you can do it. So one is to play king h7. Now, okay, the bishop can move out of the way, and then rook h7. You'll still get there, but the alternative, or we could start with rook to h2, so they'll get to the same point. All right, so I'll show you through the king e7 move order. So h6, rook f1. Now, black doesn't want to push the h-pawn because then the rook goes back to h1, and he wins. So bishop c4, check here, and now white just wastes time while the h-pawn advances to its doom. So h5, well, or not to its doom, but to the doom of the king on the h-file. Rook f8, h4, rook f5, ta-da. Okay, this is the killer. Bishop h7, okay, if h3, then, so I'll show you this. Rook h5, bishop h7, king f7 or king f8, h2, and mate. So rook f5, bishop h7, rook h5, comes to the same thing, a little bit slower. Actually, no, sorry, this one's cute. h3, king d7. So another funny little zugzwang. And that's mate. Okay, so more than one way to win this one. Okay. All right, next we've got a couple of clips or little excerpts from speed games that I played. So this is the first one. I had white against an IM here. And, all right, this position is maybe a tiny bit better for white. A little more space. Black has the bishop here, but the bishops aren't really so magnificent just yet. Anyway, I'd like to play c4 here, but the question is, well, can I do it, or is it a mistake? So take a little time, come up with your answer, and check back in when you've done it. Well, I did indeed play c4, and my opponent played knight takes e4, bishop e7, and here queen takes e7, queen takes e4 would be slightly better for white. But here's where he thought to punish me. Knight takes f2, with the idea that, okay, if I take his queen, he takes he takes my queen, I take his pawn on c7, he takes my pawn on b2, and he ends up a pawn ahead with a perfectly good position. Or if I take his knight, he takes my bishop, again, up a pawn. What he missed was queen a3. Oops. And that was the end of the game. He resigned here. Okay, next one. Again, I have white. And all right, in this position, it's black to move. And white's idea in this kind of strange-looking position is to play a5 and clamp down on black's queen side. Play a5 or maybe knight e5. So just trying to make it difficult for black to really finish developing in a natural way on the queen side. So my opponent played b6, and now if I play knight e5, he just plays bishop to b7. Or again, if a5, bishop to b7, and he's threatening knight takes c3 even. So what should I do in this position? Okay, and this isn't a white to move and win situation. It's just trying to figure out, well, you know, what can I do now? Well, when I was thinking about this position, you know, I saw, of course, the idea, and I thought, all right, well, maybe I just castle and defend my bishop, or maybe I can play queen c1, you know, like a5, bishop to b7, queen c1. But then I decided that I'll just fall for his trap. So I played a5, bishop to b7, and now I played a6, and he just assumed that I was not paying attention and played knight takes c3. But after a takes b7, he thought for a while and resigned. Because if he takes my queen, I take the rook and I make a brand new queen, and I'm going to end up a good amount of material ahead, especially since his knight, even though it can take the bishop on b2, it's not going to come out alive. So this is just the end. He should have played bishop to c6 here, then the position is roughly equal. Then I have to play something that deals with the threat of knight takes c3. So that would have been all right for him. Okay, on to the next one. And this is a nice one. This is from, so we had Korchnoi earlier. Now we have his let's say, well, one of his chief rivals and contemporaries, Tigran Petrosian, the world champion, not the contemporary Armenian grandmaster. Okay, so this is the position from Petrosian against Smyslov, played in the Soviet Championship back in 1973. Material is even. It's white to move. And the question is, can white take the pawn on d7 or not? So what do you think? If you can take it, it's great. You got a nice passed pawn on d5, but obviously, you know, a player as great as Smyslov isn't just going to leave free food lying around for white to capture at his leisure. So see if you can work out what's going on here. White to move. Well, Petrosian, who was certainly renowned for his sense of danger, played the move bishop to f4. And after this, black played b5, and the position was equal, and it was agreed drawn pretty quickly after queen to b4, rook e to c8, threatening rook c4, queen e4, h5, queen d3, rook c4, and a few more moves. A draw was agreed. So knight takes g2 is cute, h4, and if anything, maybe black even looks a tiny bit more comfortable here than white, but really it is about equal. So going back here, what was Petrosian afraid of? Queen takes d7, rook e7. And when the queen retreats, rook a to e8 just wins a piece. Because if f4, then simply f6. And the white bishop can't get back to c3 to cover the rook, or to g3. So, I mean, it can go to g3 straight away, but the f-pawn will be in the way. So that was what Petrosian was afraid of. But he missed something here. So if you haven't found it yet, see if you can figure it out in this position. Okay, here's the answer. Bishop to b8. So this nifty shot would have won the game, or at least given white a winning advantage. So if rook takes the queen, then rook to e8 is mate. And, well, what else can black do? I mean, his best is rook takes b8, but white just cashes back in. And with the very good passed d5 pawn, white should win the game. Of course, you know, you want to make sure you don't fall for queen takes g2 mate by playing d6 at an inopportune moment, but ultimately white should be winning this sooner or later. Okay, on to our next tactical puzzle. All right, this is from a game when Carlsen was a youngster. Okay, he's still pretty young. He's just turned 20. But here, at this point, he's only 12 years old. Yeah, 12 and a half years old. Okay, so this is a game against Hans Krogh Harestad, played in the Politiken Cup back in July of 2003. So it's white to move, and Carlsen has a nice army amassed on the king side and pointing at the king side. I mean, you've got both knights there, the rook, the queen, the bishop on c1, and the bishop on c2 is just an e5 push away from having a role to play as well. So white to move, what do you do? This one's a bit more complicated. So the last one was pretty clear cut. This one's a few more branches in the tree. Okay, so white actually has several good moves here, but the best plan seems to be one that can be executed with either move order. So one way is knight h5 check, g takes h5 and then e5. This is crushing. Or to go the other way, which is what happened in the game. e5, d takes e5, and knight h5 check. Okay, well, let's work through some of the ideas here. All right, if king takes h6, then knight f6 check, king g7. Actually, let me think about this for a moment. Yeah, that should be perfectly good. And then just bishop takes g5. And, okay, we're threatening queen h7 with mate in 2. And black doesn't seem to have anything that even resembles a good response at this point. So this should be an easy win. And maybe there's something even better, but that's pretty good. Let me just think for a moment here. Yeah, that's got to be it. Okay. Excuse me. Another way for black to proceed is to just retreat. White should take. And then queen h2. So threatening queen takes e5. Okay, and after, for instance, bishop to d6, then knight f7 check, king g8, knight f6 check, threatening queen takes h7 if black doesn't take things, and even if he does. So king f7, queen h7, bishop takes g6, threatening queen f7 mate, and in fact it's mate next move no matter what. If bishop to e8, for instance, knight to d7 is mate. Okay, and if king f8 here, then knight takes, wins a piece because that wins the queen. And of course, again, black's king is in desperate trouble here. Okay, finally after knight h5 check, or not finally, penultimately, there's king f8, and then just bishop takes g5 again. White's up a piece, smashing through here. Black is dead. So black played g takes h5. And now, what's the justification of the sacrifices by white? So he's given up a pawn, he's given up a piece. What has he got now? The answer? Boom. Queen takes g5 check, and it's mate next move. Okay, if the king goes, or I'm sorry, it's not mate next move. It's mate next move if black doesn't take the queen. King f8, queen g8 mate. If king h8, then knight f7 is mate. And if he does take, which happened, then rook f7 check. And whether the king goes to h8 or, as in the game, it goes to h6, rook takes h7 is mate. So very nice little combination by Carlsen, and I hope you were able to find all of that, or at least some of that. Okay, next example. So now we're going to take a look at a couple of studies. So this first one is pretty famous, but it's still very nice. And for those of you who haven't seen this, I think it'll be a real treat for you. So white to win here. This is from Kasparian, the great Armenian composer. Kind of funny. I mean, it's possible that the greatest chess player of all time and the greatest study composer of all time both have names to start with the same 6 letters. So K-A-S-P-A-R, at least in English transliteration. So Kasparian from Armenia in studies, and of course Kasparov from Azerbaijan. Well, with an Armenian mother. And then Russian citizen in chess, over-the-board chess. Okay, so white to move and win. How do we do it? All right, well, we noticed that the black king certainly is not in good shape there. Can't get out to g4. The only square it's got besides the square it's on is g6. And from g6, if it's forced back there, then h5 or f5 could be a real problem. So there follows the move knight to e8. Now if you go to f5 with the same idea of going to g7 and then playing f5 or h5 or bishop f5, the problem is that it gives up this flight square to the black king. So king g4, and even though white grabs this rook, after rook to f2, the knight's trapped, and also even if it escapes, maybe bishop to b7 check. Well, no, bishop b7, king e2. Okay, whether white could save the knight or not, he would still lose so many pawns that he's not gonna be able to win then. In any case, so knight e8, and now, okay, if f5 to try to give the g4 square as flight, well, it fails. We just take, and then knight to g7 is mate. Well, black's best is to play king g6. Trying to run away in advance. And now if the knight goes to g7, black will take one of the pawns and take twice and should hold. So white needs to find something very good here. And the move, incredibly, is h5 check. Okay, not f5, by the way. On f5, rook takes f5, h5, king takes h5, and the black king will escape his doom. So if bishop takes f5, then g4, and black lives. So h5 is right, and now, if king h5, it's mate in 2. So knight g7, and bishop f5. So rook takes h5. Okay, Now what? So if you haven't figured it out to this point, after every move, I would say, keep trying. Well, the solution here continues with the move f5 check. So very, very funny move. Rook takes f5. Okay, and now g4 with the really funny fork. The threat is to play, well, to take either way on f5 with mate, but obviously most likely would be with the bishop, because if the rook goes from h5, then you need the pawn on g4 to cover h5. So that rook can't move, but black can move the other rook. So rook to e5. And now g takes h5 is not mate, so white needs another idea. If you play knight to g7, which is interesting, so now you're threatening to play g takes h5, well, this gives black time to create a flight square with f5. So what does white do? The only winning move, bishop to f5 check. We drag the rook back to f5. Rook takes f5, and now knight to g7. And it's one of the most remarkable forks, I would think, in all of chess, certainly in chess composing. So black is absolutely stuck. He can move one rook or the other, but not both, and he has nothing else he can move. He's just dead. He moves one rook, he gets mated when white captures the other one. So he can get mated that way or this way. It's funny, it's sort of like a circuit here. You've got this energy flowing, and black can choose which way the circuit closes, but he can't avoid getting electrocuted. So one way or another, the power is going to come, whether the connection gets made through f5 or h5. So terrific study by Kasparian. Okay, now this is a much more recent one, though by another player best associated with the relatively distant past, and that's Vasily Smyslov, the great former world chess champion who just died last year, died in 2010. So it's white to move here, and white is trying to draw this position, which makes sense. He's up the exchange for a pawn, but the pawn on a2 threatens to queen. It's very, very dangerous, and black's pawns are certainly safe enough. So white has to grapple for a draw, and this is complicated, but it's really the idea, the concept that gets demonstrated is really a beautiful one, and it's a remarkable composition by Smyslov. And this one he composed in 2000, so even fairly recent. Okay, well, the first move is easy. So rook to g1. We can solve that one by eliminating all the alternatives straight away. Okay, now for black, the only move that makes any sense really is bishop to d3, which threatens to cut the rook off with bishop to b1. So here, this is one important moment for white. Okay, this is the first place where you have to solve something. Okay, rook to g1 was kind of free. This one requires a little work. Rook to a1 is one obvious candidate, but there's also a second way that white can try to prevent black from queening in two moves. Okay, well, while you're trying to solve that, let's look at rook to a1 and see what happens. So rook to a1, of course, bishop to b1, and now we have this interesting little dance here. If all the kingside pawns come off the board, of course, this is a draw, but it's not so easy. But that's what white's going to try to achieve. Now, if he plays king to d6, then black plays h6, and white is going to lose now. What black is going to do is play, okay, let's say king to d7, then king f6, then king f5, king takes f4, and then king g5, king h5, and with the second extra pawn, he wins. Okay, so white can also try h6, trying to play the tempi a little bit more carefully. So now king g6, and here, for instance, if white plays king to c6, black actually probably can take on h6, but there's a simpler way for him to win. So king f5, king d7, e5, takes, king e7, and now black can't get to the h-pawn, cannot win white's h-pawn, but what he can do is get to the queen side just in time. King d4, king f6, king c3, king g7, and king b2. So white doesn't have time to play rook a2 and then bishop takes h7. So black is winning here. Okay, back here. So we just looked at king c6. If king to d6, then king f6, and again this wins. The king goes to d7, black plays king f5, king takes f4, king g5, king takes h6. Okay, so rook to a1 doesn't quite save white. So we've got to find the second way, which is h6. So now, if bishop to b1, rook to g7 check, king f6, and rook to a7, and this time white can draw. Because the rook has a lot more freedom of movement, so there isn't going to be, those same Zugzwang possibilities aren't going to arise this time. So white draws fairly easily here. Okay, so king f6. Now rook to g7 doesn't come with check, so we have to play rook to a1 after all. Bishop to b1. And now this might look like just the same thing. I mean, what's the difference between this and the cases that we were examining earlier? How is this different? How does white draw here? Okay, so try to work out the finesses here. And here's where we start. Well, king to d6. All right, this is pretty natural, and it's in fact forced. Okay, king to f5. And now what does white do? Well, if he plays king to d7, I mean, clearly he's got to stay attached to the black e-pawn. And he either goes to d7 or to e7. Now, e7 is natural, and probably you got that, but it's important to see that it does matter. If king to d7, black plays e5 and wins. So, again, if f takes e5, king e7, the black king makes a beeline for the b2 square and again wins by a tempo. So king e7 is forced to win that race. But now the question is, well, why doesn't white just draw here? Or sorry, why doesn't black just win here with king f4, king e6, and king to g5? So if this is the best that white can do, but he's losing the h-pawn, which I said over and over again will cost him the game, then isn't this just the whole thing just hopeless for white? Well, in fact, it's not. But in most versions it is. But here white has a really remarkable draw. Okay. It's not going to involve bringing the king back to the queen side. We're trying to put it in front of the h-pawn. So king e5, king f4, g3, h2. That's not going to work either. What does the job is this. King f7, king takes h6, and now king to g8. Okay. So black has only one move worth considering here, because if you move the bishop, of course, you lose the a-pawn, then it's a dead draw. If you play king to g5, of course, rook takes a2, bishop takes a2, king takes h7. So king g6. All right, but what's the problem here? I mean, black is just going to push the h-pawn, and that's the end of the story. So what does white do here? Well, king h8. Pretty incredible move, but this draws the game. So what does black do? If he moves the king to f7, of course, rook takes a2, draws. If he plays king to h6, well, we'll see. Well, there white can just repeat. He can just play king to g8, or he can do something else too. Finally, there's pushing the h-pawn, and that's the main line. And against this, rook takes a2. Amazing. The only move that makes any sense is bishop takes a2, but that's stalemate. So really great concept. So I like this study a lot. Okay, so let's take a look at the final one. So maybe you've been struggling through this series of tactics. They've been kind of tough, I know. Though I hope the beauty that you've seen in them has at least compensated somewhat for the challenge, if that proved to be a bit much. But this one I guarantee, as long as you don't quit without trying it, you're guaranteed to solve this one. So white to move and mate in 6. All right. So I'm sure that you'll have solved this one. Okay. And the reason that you're guaranteed is because there's no choice on any move until the very end. d4, only legal move. Black has only one legal move back. b5. d5, only move. b4, only move. ab, only move, and so on. a3, b5, a2, b6. And here's the only place where there's any choice. Black can promote to whatever he wants. Queen, rook, bishop, or knight. Anything but a king. And then b7 is mate. Again, white's only move. All right, so that was a little bit of a joke, but hey, give yourself credit for it anyway if you solved it, because it shows that you kept trying. You didn't get discouraged by anything that had gone before. So again, I hope you enjoyed this. I think there's a lot of beauty in the positions that we looked at. So even if you didn't solve everything, It's okay. It was a good aesthetic experience and it was a good workout. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.